Welcome to another episode on my YouTube channel, and I'm really happy to have Steve with me. Steve, what are we going to cover today?
So today we're going to cover a little bit of the research that we've been doing in platform engineering space to highlight some really crucial problems that people have in their platform adoptions, and to give 3 asks that we really want to give people to kind of bring their platform initiatives back on track and be successful.
That sounds really exciting. And you know, if you're listening to the channel for a while, Johannes has been covering a lot of CI/CD stuff in the past. Steve, if I look at your LinkedIn, I can see that you're part of a foundation that is focused on continuous delivery, right? Tell us a bit about that, and maybe also tell us a bit about who are you? How did you and I met? Because you're not the traditional AWS guy that Johannes usually talks to.
Yeah, so I'm on the CD Foundation governing board. The CD Foundation is all about continuous delivery, including how, like, the new frontier of how we're going to get AI into continuous delivery and where it's appropriate, where we want to keep things deterministic. And I've been part of the CD Foundation for a little while as one of their outreach committee members. That basically means a cheerleader, kind of shouting about the cool projects they've got. And I joined the governing board this year. I'm also involved in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and I've been working with some really cool people there on the platform engineering maturity model and the assessment that goes with that. And so that's kind of... I'm trying to find all these different perspectives on platform engineering, and I bring those all back. They're kind of to add into the research, and so we've got like different views from people that are in absolutely massive scaled companies, and then those kind of medium companies, and they all face slightly different problems. So getting out there into the community is how I'd learn and discover things that I won't have tackled myself in my career. You know, I've been doing this for about 30 years now. But there's so many things I haven't seen because I've worked in the companies I've worked in, and there's so much other stuff out there.
Yeah, and that's exactly also what I'm going through right now. So my channel, as I said, was on CI/CD mainly, but I'm now moving out of that space a little bit, especially also focused on platform engineering. And the last video was already a recording with a colleague of mine that talks a little bit about industry standards for platform engineering. Today we're going to be more focused on the research on how to do platform engineering correctly, maybe also how to build a platform. And I'm excited for that because that will give me a learning as well for me and for my organization. So, Steve, I can see the drums in the background. What the hell do you do if you're not on the PC?
Yeah, so I love music. I play guitar, drums, all kinds of things. I only have the practice pads now with the drums. I gave up the full drum kit a while back. Went to a chap who lives 400 miles away. He drove down to get it, and he was delighted, which was nice. So I knew it was going to a good home. Yeah, so I love playing. I used to play in bands and did a little tour of Wales once.
Yeah, well, that sounds exciting. Damn, it looks like the more people that I record with the closer I'm going to get to one video where we all sing or play a song together. Because one of the last persons I recorded with, he's a musician as well, and he loves to sing, right? So maybe we can pull that up in one of the next episodes.
Yeah,
if
let's
you
put a
really
band
want
together.
to hear, yeah, if you want Steve and me to record something for music, please let us know in the comments, because that could be a really fun thing, or maybe at KubeCon next time. I don't know. But jokes aside, Steve, you have 30 years of experience in industry. You just said. I guess you have seen a lot of things. Why is platform engineering and that whole thing so attractive to you? Why are you investing into that space?
So I think I'm interested in it for 2 reasons. Obviously, I've been tracking DevOps and Dora's research for a while, and they've put together this really incredible model of all of these practices that are found to help teams and organizations be more successful. And of course, when platform engineering first emerged, it emerged under the big trumpet call of DevOps is dead. And I think one of the things that we've discovered over time is that the things in that model are still needed. But the idea behind platform engineering is we can actually lift some of the stress and pressure off of the application teams and have another team kind of do it in a way that's more likely to be standardized across the whole organization. So that's what makes me interested about it. It's like, how do we keep the benefits of teams that fully own the applications they build, but also lift some of that load off of them and put that into a platform?
So that means for you, it's really an additional development in terms of how do we develop industry standards, or maybe let's say also organizational standards, right? And that's the key part on how you look at platform engineering. Okay, that makes sense. Um, and when we started to talk about this episode, we also mentioned that there is a lot of research going into it. How do you what isn't everybody just building a platform these days? So KubeCon 2024 and I think 2025 was all about we are all building our internal developer platforms and we all use Backstage for it. And then it somehow changed and now everybody's kind of, it feels like we're in a development that is not so clear. How do you see things? What's the state right now from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask people if they're doing platform engineering, that certainly high percentage of people are saying yes. But when you compare what platform engineering looks like in two different organizations, they can be entirely different things. So lots of platforms are tackling the continuous integration, continuous delivery part of the process. That's where their focus is. How do we get changes to flow smoothly through to production? But there are also platforms that are much more focused on the infrastructure automation. And it's all about, developers were suddenly confronted with all of this new containerization and Kubernetes, and how do we deal with ingress and routing and all of these problems. And some development teams were just finding it difficult to keep up with all of that infrastructure change whilst also still delivering the features that are making money for their organization. So those teams are benefiting more from maybe some of the infrastructure automation. And it's interesting to see how the ownership is different, like between two organizations. So I suppose platform engineering has a big shape, which is the thing we talk about amongst ourselves in the whole community, which is all these things it could do. But most of the time, it's like a puzzle piece. It's like, this is the thing that's needed in my organization, right? This is the gap that I have, or this is the opportunity that we've got to make something better in this really specific context. So that's what's super interesting about it, is that it's a different shape everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem that DevOps faced as well. Different interpretations of what DevOps means for different people. I see platform engineering going into a similar direction, and I find it really hard to grasp what it really means for industry, right? And I think the platform engineering maturity model that you already briefly mentioned is a good direction, but we need more people to adopt it and also to use it in the day-to-day conversations, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's always funny with DevOps. Folks always say, oh, I don't even know what DevOps means anymore. And it's always useful just to go back to that really simple early definition of aligning the goals for dev and operations to encourage collaboration, right? Everything else that comes out of DevOps comes from two people talking to each other.
Yes, and that also means what platform engineering at the end is. Like for me, it takes DevOps to a state where you identify patterns of different and multiple teams, and then you solve those patterns for those teams. Right. Does that match the research? Like you shared with me a platform engineering report. I think that also your organization has been putting together. Let's talk a little bit about that. Why did you do it? What do you think is the benefit on it? How much is it used to only market your product or your services?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of the reports that I see in my inbox every day are kind of like, they're almost like a sales pitch for why you should buy a product. We are super curious. So I work with a researcher called Dr. Charlotte Fleming. She's super curious about how all this stuff works. And I'm out there speaking to folks from the CNCF and the CDF. And we got loads of questions that we can't answer. So that's the motivation behind us doing the research. So you won't find anything in here about Octopus Deploy, the company I work for. This is just us going out and asking lots of different organizations what they're doing. And one of the questions that we really had that we wanted to answer is, why are organizations spending money on this? Because in my experience, it's kind of hard sometimes to get your organization to spend money. I remember once my team wanted a cloud testing tool so that we could call this tool from our CI process and say, test this on staging for us, do our end-to-end tests. And it was like, $80 a month. And we could not get someone to sign off on this budget for it. So I wanted to find out, platforms cost a lot more than $80 a month. In some cases, people are putting entire teams, sometimes multiple teams, into this platform engineering initiative. So it sounds like it's a pretty expensive thing. So we wanted to find out why people were willing to spend that money. And what we were expecting to find, based on the kind of community discussions, was reduce cognitive load, help developers to focus more on feature development, all these kind of social benefits. And I'll throw a chart up here because what we got was slightly different to what we expected. So this is just a simple kind of bar chart, but you can see that most of the motivation for people adopting platforms are things like improving efficiency and standardizing process. Mm-hmm. And these are much more top-down motivations for platforms rather than it being about developer experience so much. So that was like a super interesting finding for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting, right? So if I talk to people around why are you building a platform, and that can be an internal developer platform, but it can be something else, right? One of the things that a lot of engineers tell me is that they want to reduce the friction and reduce the possibilities, right? And with that, kind of improve the speed of going to production as well. At least that's what I'm hearing. So it doesn't really match the findings.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because platform teams are sitting in between two strong stakeholders for their platform. They have the developers. Developers are super important, and really they should be super close to them to understand how they can help the developers do their role. Mm-hmm. But they also have people who are funding it, who have potentially very different motivations for wanting to fund it. They're from the evidence, it sounds like they're not so interested in that kind of developer friction, cognitive load type situation. But I think a smart platform team will work out how to balance those two sides of the coin, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Okay, that's interesting. What other findings did you come up with, or did you find out that were surprising to you?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things is we wanted to understand how big should a platform be. Obviously, a platform might do just a couple of things. Maybe it just automates the setting up of Kubernetes clusters, and so teams can self-serve those. Or maybe it does the entire CI/CD pipeline, which is like a much broader set of capabilities. And one of the things we found was having more features tends to make platforms more successful, which is interesting because I think it does also cause something of a dilemma for platform teams. So I have here like a little, I call it a TIE fighter chart because they look like Star Wars TIE fighters. And it shows that in terms of platforms meeting all their goals, they tend to have the most features. But I always caveat that by saying that some platforms were meeting all of their goals with just 3 features. And this is things like maybe it does, something like the builds. They take over the build situation, right? Mm-hmm. They'll nurture the build servers, give everyone a way of easily getting those. And then maybe it does deployment automation. And so they kind of do that piece. And so with as little as a few features like 3, you can be successful. But the trend is that the more features you have, so the median is 6 features in the all goals versus some goals being 4 features. So there's definitely a trend towards more features being more useful to the teams and to the sponsors.
Okay, so that means to the right we see the number of features that a platform has.
That's right, yeah.
Okay,
so
got it, yeah.
Yeah, and you can see that the data kind of shifts further and further right as platforms are more successful, which hints that they need to kind of have more features. But the dilemma for platform teams obviously is they need to be careful how much of each of those features they build. Because if you are building just a couple of features, you can completely bespoke it. But if you're going to have like some of these teams have 9 features, either you're going to need a huge team to support that, or you need to, I think Gregor Hopi says try and create a thin platform so that you aren't doing too much of the work, because otherwise you get stuck in that maintenance trap for the platform. So platform teams definitely need to come up with smart ways of avoiding taking on the complexity and then just being harmed by it on a daily basis, which I think is, some teams seem to have that problem. It's like they've shifted the complexity from the developers, but now the platform team is miserable.
Yeah, and that's, I think, part of the problem that I see with platform engineering teams as well. And a research I would be interested in is what skills does a real platform engineer need? Like, how do you what skills are the core components of a person working in a platform team versus a person working in a DevOps team versus a person working in a development team? And I think there's a huge difference in the way of looking at how to build the platform, and the skills are also should be different as well, right? And putting that into perspective of adoption rate would be, I think, something that maybe you can do next year.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well, that question of what skills do they need, because I think probably a clue to that will be, if you look at a dev team that doesn't have a platform to build on, there's usually one or two people in the dev team who are like caretakers of the build server and the test automation. Those are the people that probably are the right kinds of people to go into the platform team, because they already care about the things beyond the application.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And then the next conversation, I talked to Luke about that a few days ago, is the question around when is it worth for an organization to invest into building a platform, or maybe only centralizing portions of things, right? And when do you call something a platform? So we also wanted to talk a bit about adoption rates and how important it is to get feedback from the users when building a platform. So maybe let's go into that direction, right? So assume we're in a mid-sized organization. We have built a platform, and the platform team, we believe the platform is perfect and it solves all problems that our development team has. How do I measure that? How do I find out if I'm right with my assumption?
Yeah, so I think this is like a crucial topic. There are three metrics that I think can be shared by all platform teams everywhere. Market share is one of those. So, and that's tracking how many of the developers in your organization could use the platform, because the technology stack they're using is one that you support. Because every organization will have,
But why are you saying could? Isn't it like I need to force teams to use the platform, otherwise the platform is useless?
That's very common, a very common point, actually, because people are investing a lot of money in platforms, and so they want people to use it because they've spent all this money on it, and that totally makes sense. But actually, one of the strongest signals you can get on whether your platform is working and solving real problems is the adoption rate. And if you're forcing adoption, you're effectively forcing a very positive signal, which is going to be misleading. So what you want to do is make it so the platform is optional, and then your adoption rate is actually going to be a really strong signal. So if out of your 1,000 developers in your organization, half of them could use the platform because you support their tech stack, but only a small proportion of them are using it, that suggests the platform isn't giving the developer enough motivation, right? It's not solving enough problems for them. Maybe you've done the build part of it and the developers were already comfortable with that, so it doesn't actually alleviate any pain, and they would prefer it if you solved a different problem.
That's like one of the first times I'm hearing that approach. Like, for me, it was always like, I build a platform, all teams need to use it, and because all teams need to use it, I'm going to be successful with the platform, and the teams will be more successful as well. But you're kind of putting a different stake here and like saying platform adoption needs to be optional for the teams, because that will help you to measure the quality of your platform. If people don't want to jump on it and don't want to use it, the platform is not good enough for that, right?
Yeah, it's not compelling enough.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, to be honest. But that also means that it needs to be simple for teams to onboard to the platform, right? It cannot be a big project, or how do you look at that?
Yeah, exactly. And this is what I would describe as the second metric, is that onboarding time. So if a team says, actually, yeah, we think this is going to solve a problem for us, do they now have to have like a whole transformation project to try and bring this platform into their team? Or is there a really easy way for them to kind of onboard to that platform and use it? And sometimes that onboarding is the reason for low adoption because it's too big a step up and you need to kind of make it easier for people to actually come inside your platform. You know, if it's like, well, you have to, like, you can't bring your own existing Git repo and your own existing this and that, so you just have to move your code into our platform. People are going to be very nervous about that.
I agree, but you're kind of also putting more load on the platform team somehow now, because you're telling them, okay, you need to have a simple migration path to get into the platform, and you also need to support the 500 different types of repositories that we already have in the organization. Isn't that an overlay load for that team?
It can be if you support too much. So the recommendation I think that I would give people is if you look at the people who are eligible to use the platform, and I've got a little graph here that kind of shows a comparison of the percentage of developers that could use a platform and the percentage that are using it. If you pick a tech stack that is only used by one team in your organization, the platform's actually not going to be very valuable to your organization. So you would normally expect the team to start with either the most prevalent technology, like if everyone is using Java, you'd expect to start there, right?
True.
Or you would start with what you see as being like the flagship technology. If you're like, we're going to bring everyone onto Kubernetes, then you would start with that as making it an appealing way for teams to actually get into that containerized space and deploy their applications. So that's like the two strategies that I think you can use. If you pick a really esoteric area of your company where only like 50 developers are using it instead of 1,000 developers, your eligible share is going to be super low. So yeah, but the onboarding story is super important. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to support every technology, but when you do support a technology, you also need to think about how do people come and use what we've built. And I suppose this is part of platforms being treated like a product. I would love everyone to use the product I build, right? And I'd love to force them to use it. And I'd love them to do whatever it takes to get on board. But actually, I'm like, because of commercial reasons, it makes sense for me to try and make that as easy as possible and, you know, support the use cases people have.
And that means, from a platform perspective, that onboarding to the platform should be a self-service, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the ideal, and this may not be achievable in all cases, is that you can self-serve this stuff by just pushing a button. You know, I suppose if you imagine someone setting up a new service project, they're like, we need a new microservice. It's going to handle loan repayment calculations. You can hit a button and you get a Git repo, you get a build, you get something sending that package to your artifact management. You get something that's going to deploy it to 3 environments. Those environments are all provisioned. It's got security scanning baked into it. You know, like this is like a perfect world. Not everyone is going to be able to build that. They're certainly not going to be able to do that in the first year of building a platform. It's going to take time. But that's like the kind of wish list to look for. Imagine if you're starting a new project and you hit a button and the whole, whether you call it like a walking skeleton or a tracer bullet, that whole end-to-end piece is there. And you just open it up and start writing the actual first test, you know, off you go.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool, yeah, pretty insightful, yeah, and I think that might make you think a little bit about the way that you position your platform as well, right? So if you're listening to this and starting your platform engineering journey, or maybe you already have a platform, Steve just mentioned, treat your platform as a product, as one of the key aspects of all of this, right? And I think we all talk about that, but still, not all organizations do that. There's 2 more metrics being called out in the report, as far as I remember. One of them is the Net Promoter score. I recently talked about that with Luke, so I propose that we're going to skip that for today. How you think about the key customer metrics? Is this something that is then tailored to the platform, or is it tailored to the users of the platform?
Yeah, so this is the tricky one. When we were trying to build this set of metrics, and we wanted to try and give people something that they could compare, so they could look at other companies in their industry and say, how are you doing for market share, onboarding times, net promoter score, or CSAT, or whatever you want to use. But there was always this element that ties back to, why did someone pay for this platform, and what goals do you have for that platform? So, and that differs per organization. So in the organization who said, we want a platform because we just want standardization, it would make sense to measure the kind of spread of all of that non-standardization and track it as it becomes more aligned. So that you can say to the people who wanted standardization, this is how far we've got with making that a reality. And so you just need to track through every reason that you've got for having the platform, and that's from the people paying for it, the sponsors, and also for the people using it. It's worthwhile just tracking those so that you can say, are we actually achieving the goals of the platform? And because that's a good feedback loop. It's like, oh, why aren't things standardizing when we've done this? It's like, something must be wrong, something's missing. The key thing for this, we're finding that this is super important when it comes to keeping the budget for the platform. Especially right now, organizations suddenly want to spend a lot of money on AI. So True. They're going to be looking at platform teams and saying, they're kind of expensive. We could buy more credits and more tokens if we reduce the size of the team, or, hey, the platform does enough. Let's just freeze it and spend the money elsewhere. That's going to leave all of the developers stranded on a platform that's not being maintained. So we need to give the people making these decisions the information they need to make the right decisions. And if the platform's valuable, hopefully having some metrics is going to help you keep the money, keep the budget, and continue developing the platform.
Yeah, that's a good call out, right? That also means that platforms need to adopt, right? And that also means that even if you have completed your first iteration of the platform, it's a living product. It will constantly change, and it needs to adopt to changing requirements and also to changing industry standards and kind of points. I think that's important. Okay, let's drive down to what's the conclusion of the research that you did? What you would recommend organizations to do?
So I've got this thing, I call it the 3 asks. And it's a little bit like I'm begging platform teams. I'm like, please do these 3 things, because it's going to help platform engineering in general, but it's also going to help the team. And the first one of those is to not forget the users of the platform. Even if you're in an organization where the stakeholders, the sponsors of the platform, are like a really strong voice, eventually users who aren't getting what they need from the platform make so much noise that even those sponsors are going to feel like giving up on the idea. So speak to the users at least monthly, so that you can kind of keep in touch with what they're not getting, where there's friction, where there's things that could be improved. And try and track it. We do recommend things like NPS or CSAT or anything which just allows people to rate the use of the platform. And it might be that you pop up something if they've done a few builds and you're like, how are you finding the build process? Just give it a rating so that we know if that element of the platform is working. So that's a key one. Keep in touch with users. The second one is the measurement. Whatever the reasons your organization decided to build a platform, track those and make sure the organization is getting what they wanted from that process. And that's up and down. So the sponsors of the platform and the developers, they all need to be getting something valuable from it if it's going to succeed. And then on this question of making platforms mandatory, this is my real begging now. Please don't make your platform mandatory. Make it optional, but make your policies mandatory. So if you need all applications to have been security scanned and dependencies being checked, make that policy mandatory so everyone has to do it. When the policy is mandatory, I want to use the platform because I get that for free. That's the idea. So you can create a really strong motivation for platform adoption without forcing people to use it. Like when I'm forced to do something, I do it very reluctantly, and that just makes more work for everyone.
That is true.
Yeah. That's the three big asks.
Cool. And I've heard especially the last one before, right? I think it's interesting, right? It seems like we have been doing platform engineering for 3 years, but still we are solving the same problems that we tried to solve 3 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're
Steve.
doomed. We're doomed.
Yeah, we kind of are. We kind of are, right? Another thing that I think we might need to be a little bit clearer on is what is a feature of a platform, and if we're talking platform, are we talking internal developer platform? I assume we are, right? But I think that's something to streamline a little bit as well. Steve, thank you very, very much. This was very insightful. If people have follow-up questions, how do they find you? I found you on the CNCF Slack, so I know that you're there, but what is your preferred way of people reaching out to you?
Yeah, so you can find me in the CNCF or the CDF Slack, but you can also contact me on LinkedIn. I should be quite easy to find on there. It'll be a picture of me grinning with a CICD t-shirt on. So yeah, just search me up, Steve Fenton on LinkedIn, and feel free to ask questions and follow-ups. We're doing more research in this space. So if there's something we haven't answered that you think is fundamental, like we can look into those as well in future research reports.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. And if you need input for the next research, I have a lot of questions that we can tackle on as well, Steve. And if you are
Amazing.
watching this one and you have questions as well, please let us know either in the comments to the social post or let us know in the comments of the video. However you prefer to interact with us, we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Steve, it was a pleasure. Have an amazing rest of your day, and talk to you soon, and maybe next year at KubeCon we're going to meet in person.